A woman stands before a temple wall in Egypt, chisel in hand, and begins to erase a queen from history. Stone by stone, the face disappears. The name disappears. For 3,000 years, almost no one remembers her. And yet, once, she ruled the most powerful kingdom on earth, wearing the false beard of a king. Her name was Hatshepsut. She was not supposed to rule at all. She was born around 1507 BCE, the daughter of Pharaoh Thutmose I. In ancient Egypt, women could hold real influence, especially as the wife of a king or the mother of one. But the throne itself belonged to men. When her father died, her half-brother became Thutmose II, and Hatshepsut became his queen. It was a normal arrangement for the time. Royal marriages often connected siblings to protect the bloodline. Then came the first real complication. Thutmose II died young, after a short reign. The heir to the throne was a child, Thutmose III, his son by a secondary wife, not by Hatshepsut. A boy could not lead armies or manage a kingdom stretching from Nubia to the Euphrates. So Hatshepsut became regent, ruling in his name until he came of age. This, too, was not unusual. Regencies happened. What happened next was, within a few years, Hatshepsut did something almost no woman in Egyptian history had done before her. She took the title of Pharaoh. Not queen. Not regent. Pharaoh, the full, formal, divine kingship of Egypt. Temple inscriptions from Karnak and her mortuary temple describe her coronation in the language reserved for kings, and surviving statues show her performing rituals only a pharaoh could perform. This is where the story becomes strange, and where the human tension begins. To rule as pharaoh meant more than holding power. It meant becoming, in image and ritual, the pharaoh Egyptians expected, a role built around male kingship for centuries. So Hatshepsut adopted the visual language of a king. Later statues show her with the traditional false beard worn by pharaohs during ceremonies, and with a male royal body in formal art, even though other images clearly show her as a woman. Egyptologists generally agree this was not deception aimed at her people. Egyptians almost certainly knew their pharaoh was a woman. It was something deeper, a visual argument that the office of pharaoh itself was divine and eternal, regardless of the person inside it. Imagine standing in her position. You are gifted, trained since childhood in the rituals of a court that has never prepared a woman for this exact role. You hold real power, real intelligence, real ambition. And the only symbolic language available to express supreme authority was built entirely around men. She did not reject herself to gain the throne. She stretched the old symbols until they could hold her. It worked, at least for a while, and it worked remarkably well. Hatshepsut's reign, which lasted roughly 2 decades, is remembered by historians not for war, but for extraordinary construction and trade. She commissioned one of the most architecturally daring buildings in Egyptian history, her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri, built into the cliffs near the Valley of the Kings. Its long terraces and columned halls were designed to blend into the mountain itself, as though the temple had grown from the rock. She also organized one of the most famous trade expeditions in Egyptian records, a journey to the Land of Punt, likely located along the coast of modern Somalia or Eritrea, though its exact location is still debated among historians. Temple reliefs show ships returning loaded with myrrh trees, ebony, ivory, gold, and exotic animals. For a civilization that valued incense in religious ritual, this was not simply wealth. It was sacred material, brought home under her name. This is a natural moment to pause the story for a second, and it connects directly to the mystery driving Hatshepsut's whole reign. How do you prove your right to rule when the rulebook was never written for you? If you're enjoying pulling apart a real historical puzzle like this one, stories like Hatshepsut's are exactly the kind of thing worth following closely and worth pausing on, the way we're doing right now. While Hatshepsut built temples and expanded trade, something quieter was happening in the background. Thutmose III, the boy she had once ruled for, was growing up. Egyptian records show he was not pushed aside completely. He held a real position, serving as a military commander, and inscriptions from later in his reign describe active campaigns. Historians generally do not see clear evidence of open conflict between them during her lifetime. There's no surviving record of rebellion, arrest, or execution. The two seem, from the evidence available, to have coexisted, an unusual and uneasy kind of shared rule, a woman claiming supreme kingship while a legitimate male heir waited, trained, and led soldiers only steps away from the throne. That tension, unspoken but ever present, is part of what makes her story so human. She had reached the summit of power in a system that was never designed to let her stay there permanently. Every monument she built was also, in a sense, an argument for why she deserved to remain. Then, around 1458 BCE, Hatshepsut died. Modern examination of a mummy believed to be hers, identified in the early 2000s partly through a tooth found in a box bearing her name, suggests she may have suffered from diabetes and possibly bone cancer, and died in her 40s or 50s. Thutmose III became sole pharaoh, ruling for decades afterward and becoming one of Egypt's most successful military leaders, sometimes called the Napoleon of ancient Egypt for his conquests. For years after her death, nothing seemed unusual. But late in Thutmose III's reign, something changed. Her statues were pulled down. Her image was chiseled off temple walls. Her name was removed from official king lists, replaced or simply erased, leaving blank spaces where a ruler once stood. At Deir el-Bahri, the temple she had designed with such care, images of her were systematically destroyed. This is the question that has fascinated historians for more than a century. Why? The obvious explanation, that Thutmose III acted out of long-held anger, striking back the moment he finally held full power, was the popular theory for decades. It's dramatic, and it fits a familiar story of betrayal and revenge. But the evidence complicates it. The destruction did not happen immediately after her death. It happened years later, well into his independent reign, when Thutmose III's own position was already completely secure. A furious young king erasing a rival makes emotional sense. A confident, established ruler doing the same thing decades later raises a harder question. Many Egyptologists today lean toward a different explanation, one far less personal and far more political. Hatshepsut's rule as female pharaoh was, in the framework of Egyptian kingship, an anomaly, something the system had no easy way to explain to future generations. By erasing her from the formal record, Thutmose III may not have been attacking her memory out of hatred. He may have been protecting the idea of an unbroken line of male pharaohs, smoothing history into a shape that made sense within Egyptian religious tradition. Some evidence even suggests the campaign against her memory was carried out gradually, possibly continued or completed under his successor. The exact truth remains unknown. What we do know is the result: for nearly 3,000 years, Hatshepsut was almost invisible to history. Early archaeologists piecing together broken king lists sometimes assumed a mistake, or missed her entirely. It was only in the 19th century, as scholars learned to read hieroglyphs again and slowly reconstructed damaged inscriptions, that her existence became clear, and only in the 20th century that historians began to understand the full scale of what she had accomplished. There's something quietly devastating in that. A woman spent 20 years reshaping the symbols of kingship to hold a place for herself, building one of the most beautiful temples in Egyptian history, funding expeditions that reached distant lands, and keeping a kingdom stable and prosperous. And then, deliberately, someone tried to make sure none of it would be remembered. It almost worked. But stone remembers, even when names are gone. Beneath damaged carvings, faint outlines of her original image sometimes remained. Broken statues, buried rather than destroyed, waited underground for centuries. Fragments of her name survived in places the erasure missed. When historians began matching these pieces together, a woman who had been systematically removed from the record slowly came back into focus. If you've made it this far into her story, you already understand why archaeologists still argue about her today, and honestly, that kind of patient, careful piecing together of the past is worth returning to, whenever a new discovery or a forgotten figure like this one resurfaces. Today, Hatshepsut is recognized as one of the most successful pharaohs in Egyptian history, not despite ruling as a woman, but as part of a reign historians increasingly describe as remarkably stable, prosperous, and architecturally ambitious. Her temple at Deir el-Bahri still stands, drawing visitors who walk the same terraces she designed. Her damaged statues are displayed in museums, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, pieced back together from fragments that survived deliberate destruction. What remains uncertain still matters. We don't know exactly what Hatshepsut felt as she took the throne, or whether she saw the growing shadow of Thutmose III as a threat during her lifetime. We don't know precisely why the destruction of her memory happened when it did, decades after she was gone. Historians continue to debate these questions using every fragment of evidence available, and that ongoing uncertainty is part of what keeps her story alive rather than settled. What we do know is enough to understand who she was. A woman who inherited a system built entirely without her in mind, and instead of waiting for permission to lead, she took the oldest symbols of power in her civilization and made them fit her. For 20 years, that was enough. Afterward, for millennia, it was almost erased. The chisel marks on her temple walls are still visible today, if you know where to look, faint grooves where a face used to be. They were meant to remove her from memory forever. Instead, they became evidence of exactly how much someone once needed the world to forget her, which, in its own strange way, is a kind of proof that she mattered more than anyone wanted to admit. If stories like this one, quiet mysteries buried in stone, waiting centuries to be understood, are the kind of history that stays with you, there are more like it out there worth exploring, one carefully uncovered piece at a time.